What is going on, everyone? My name's Boit, and I am back with an Age of Mythology, the extended edition tier list. This is a revised tier list from my previous one, much well thought out, very much 2021 tier list. It's time to get into it. Do we want to start at the top of the throne or do we want to start at the bottom of the throne? That's the question here. I'm going to start with the top. You guys know it already. You know he's my favorite, my pick. We have Fuji sitting at the top. Now, before we get into anything more here, let's jump into the criteria for this. I think it's a little bit important to get this out of the way early in the video so you'll understand why I think certain gods are where. So I've got criteria here. We've got 5 criteria in this list. We've got consistency, we've got early game abuse, we've got timing attacks, we've got 2 town center game, and we have the late game. These 5 criteria are pretty much what I want to classify as the important parts about a god's kit in this game, and we'll go through them all for each of these gods when we go through. I'll try and explain why they are what they are and go from there. So first one, we have Fuji here. So let's start with consistency. I think consistency is the most important part about a god. If they're not consistent, then they're not going to be high on this tier list. It's as simple as that. You might be like, well, this god, it beat me in this game and I felt really high. I felt like I couldn't win. It's so strong. It's like, well, that god, if it's low on the tier list and it's doing well, it's probably only doing well on a couple of maps. And that's a real big problem in terms of where you want to put something onto the tier list. Anyways, Fuji is S class in consistency. He's got an S for consistent play. And this is a big part in thanks to domestication. Domestication and Year of the Goat make this god incredibly consistent. Every single game, this god is going to get a good amount of goat, get super value out of domestication, and is going to be able to do whatever he wants to do on whatever map, regardless of the spawn. This also means he's going to be able to adapt to whatever he needs to. If it's a defensive map, he's going to be able to do defensive play. If it's an aggressive map, he's going to be able to do aggressive play. So we'll get into the next one. We've got the early game abuse. Now, early game abuse essentially means how well can a god take advantage of an opponent's bad map. So for example, if my opponent has bad forward gold mine, how well can my god on the tier list deal with winning the game based off of that bad map of our opponent? So Fuji here, he has an S-class early game abuse in the fact that he has the unit, the Immortal, which is ridiculously strong in the early game. He has the Call to Arms God Power, which gives himself an extra 4 units early game, which means that if you only have to get 4 units out and then you cast Call to Arms, you immediately increased your population by, what is it? I think Terracotta Soldier is 3 population. So you're getting 11 population straight away, because all the other things you would use it on would be Halberdier or Chokonu. Probably Halberdier would be your best bet, but you get a ton of units out instantly, and then you go kill their opponent's gold mine. It's really hard for them to stop. So that's the big thing there for Fuji. Now, the 2 town center game, it's pretty self-explanatory. How well does this god do in a defensive map where you want to go in for the 2 town centers and go into more of a boom war? And Fuji, cheaper town center, fastest classical age in the game, fastest second town center in the game, maybe bar Set and the Egyptians if they have a good map. So Fuji, very, very good at the 2 town center game. And then finally, the late game. This is the only one where I take a small point off of Fuji, and that's it goes down to an A. He's not an S tier late game god, but he is still a very, very good late game god with blessed construction. If you utilize blessed construction on towers, it means you can set up your towers really, really quickly on a location. And that's going to give you a fantastic foothold to set up in the late game. But the big thing is that, like most of the games, Fuji is going to end before the late game. And if Fuji doesn't end the game by the late game, he still has a chance to win the game, but most of the time he's winning by then. And that's why he's sitting at the top. He is very, very well-rounded god, very super strong. And also, Fuji doesn't share this spot by himself. Let's talk a little bit about how this tier list works. I'm splitting it up into the S, A, B, C, D if a god is on the same level as the other god, that means it's really close. It means I can't really differentiate between the two. I'm going to give the edge to the one that's closest to the left. I'm going to give the edge to Fuji here. But this is super close. Putting Set into the second position here in the S-class region of the tier list. We've got Set has the S tier consistency, super important, having those the priest being able to convert animals, bring them back home. If it's low hunt, you can go and convert those animals, bring them in. He's got the best scouting in the game. We didn't talk about that with Fuji, but Fuji also has very good scouting with the double scouts cavalry that they get early. Set exactly the same. He's got a priest, he's got a hyena. He's going to be able to grab all the goats. It's going to be fantastic. He's also got a solution to not getting the goats, which is, I mean, you can play around it, but vision, shifting sands on the enemy goats. You know, you can grab your enemy goats if you feel like you need some more herdables in your base for later. Very, very consistent god because of that. Also gets free hunt as he advances through the ages, similar to how Fuji is going to be able to get free herdables by casting his god power, obviously. So it's very similar in that regard. The timing attacks from Set, very, very strong Mythic Age timing attacks come from Set with 2 town center play, or even just like essentially just anything with the Horus timing. Very, very strong. Very few gods are going to be able to stop Set from getting that. There's a couple of gods which Set might have a little bit of trouble, but it's going to work out if you really know the ins and outs of Set, put the pressure on, and everything else is just history here now. Set also, very similar to Fuji, has the fastest second town center grab in the game, which is exactly the same as Fuji. Basically, essentially, it's a 4-minute advance time, and he gets the second town center up super consistently if you need to do that, and you know when you want to do that as well is super important because you've scouted the whole map with Set. So it's really, really good god to be doing that. And then again, similar to Fuji, does get hit a little bit in the late game. The late game's not bad for Set by any stretch of the imagination. You can go Thoth and get Book of Thoth, which helps out immensely if you're in that situation, in that sort of matchup where Thoth is going to work. But for the most part, you're going to be going Horus, so it doesn't really apply. But he is an A tier late game god. And again, similar to Fuji, you're probably going to be in a really good position regardless. He still has access to Mercenary. He's got access to the Pharaoh and power rate on the market. Super, super strong late game god. I'm going to jump down now into the A tier. We have we have Ra, the Egyptian gods, sitting mightily strong here at the top of the tier list. Ra is really, really strong god, is an S-class consistent god. And this is important. Like the other gods, I do value consistency at the top of this kind of tier list shenanigans. He's consistent simply because he can, if it's a bad map, he's going to be able to get farms up and rain every single time. He's going to be able to collect the goats with his scout, at least enough. He doesn't have to collect all of them. He's going to be able to scout enough of the map. He's going to be able to see enough, and his kit is strong enough that he doesn't really have to see the entire map to know what to do. He's very, very good on every single map, just like the other gods. So super consistent. Where Ra is let down and why Ra is probably not an S tier god is that Ra doesn't really have early game abuse. Now, Ra does have some Bast shenanigans, but it's more cheese than actually solid early game abuse. You're never going to really be able to punish your opponent for a poor map because you're not going to know they've got a poor map. I feel like I should go back and talk about Set just a little bit because I feel like I missed his early game abuse strategies. So those are shifting sands tower strategies. Those are like the classical fight from Set can be really strong. Shifting sand, Pharaoh, Wadjet, Priest onto your opponent, super strong as well. A lot of this stuff from Set is why he's got that S tier early game abuse. Anyways, I missed that. Okay, we've got Ra. We said consistent is S. We've got the early game abuse is only an A here. It might even be a B, but I put the A in because Set does have access to shifting sands. So Set can do some early game abuse with shifting sands. Set does have the priest Wadjet Pharaoh combination to go and hit their opponent if they've scouted that out. And you do have some classical fight shenanigans which can kick your opponent off guard. But I put A here. It's probably too high. It's probably a B. Let you guys decide that one if you so feel like it. Timing attacks for Ra, Super, super strong timing attack god. Ra gets a huge amount of resources from rain, gets a very, very early mythic age with Osiris or Horus. Doesn't matter really which one, depends on the matchup. And you're going to be able to put a ton of pressure onto your opponent, a very important part in the game in order to get those wins if you see them there. Ra obviously has an S tier 2 town center game. Everyone knows the 2 town center Ra task strategy. Super, super strong. You can also do similar stuff that Set does with a 4-minute advance time with Hunt if you scout out a really good second town center as well. And then obviously the late game for Ra is S tier. He's going to have all of the empowerment to boost his economy and power on the market. He's going to have all those beautiful Horus upgrades with Magi, with sun-dried mud bricks, super strong towers, super strong ballista towers. Just your general Egyptian late game shenanigans here, super strong. Let's move on to the next god. We've got in the A tier again, Nuwa sitting here in the A tier. Now, the only reason really why I don't have Nuwa above Ra and maybe not even in the S tier is because of Nuwa's consistency. Nuwa is not good on every single map. Nuwa is going to fail pretty hard on the water maps. She definitely struggles on Mediterranean. She's okay on Midgard, but still there's better gods on Midgard, and she's kind of a wet noodle on Anatolia as well. But on land maps, she's got a really, really solid game plan, really, really strong god here. She's got pretty good early game abuse. It's an A tier, but it could be S tier. Depends on really how you think about it. But I'm going with A tier here. She's got call to arms, so she can do very similar stuff to Fuji. It's just going to hit a little bit later, which means your opponent might be able to defend against it. That's why I put it A tier. It might be A plus. Maybe A plus, but it's definitely not Fuji level of strong early game shenanigans. But she definitely has some options here. Her timing attacks, they're kind of there in a way, but they kind of aren't. It's a weird one. It's not like she doesn't have timing attack. She's got the combination of Geyser and Volley, which can clean an army up if you cast it well, which basically makes it on the level of like Frost or Lightning Storm or something like that in terms of army killing potential. But she doesn't really have like a Mythic Age push, which with a destructive god power. She's more going to rely on getting her white tigers out or getting out super cavalry with her Mythic Age technology. So she doesn't really have good timing attacks. It could be a B tier for her timing attacks, but I'm going to put A tier simply because the timings kind of are still there. They're not quite destructive enough for it to be S tier. And you kind of understand how this works as we go along. We've got the 2 town center game for Nuwa is an S tier. You don't get them up as fast as Fuji or Set because you're a little bit slower. However, her late game is bonkers good because of the cheaper units, the extra 10 population. So that's S tier there in of itself, which makes that 2 town center, even though it's a little bit later, just that much better because you're aiming to get to the late game. If you go on 2 town centers, that's going to allow you to get to that late game a little bit easier. And Nuwa is a late game dream if you're trying to play that way. Just to continue and just to wrap that up just a little bit more, the white tiger is the big reason here for Nuwa's late game dominance. If an opponent has got an answer to that or can kill Nuwa before that, she's going to fall over. But there's not a lot of gods that really do that very well. That's why she's up in the A tier here and her late game is so strong. We're going to move into the B tier here. Now, when I show you this as a B tier, I don't want you to think about it as like B as in like terrible. These tier lists are very close together. There might just be like a point here. And maybe you could even justify putting one of these gods up into the A tier, for example. But I'm putting him into the B tier. You're going to have to deal with it. We're going to chuck in here into the B tier. We've got at the top of the B tier, we have Poseidon. Now, Poseidon is one of those gods who I might want to chuck up into the A tier. He is very, very close to these gods, and you're going to see why when I show you the rankings. We've got the consistency. He's got an S tier consistency. This god is good on every single map. Casting Lure at the start, or at any point in the game, allowing him to get that hunt into his base, that is bonkers consistent. That just like helps you out every single game, and is a big reason why Poseidon is super strong. What makes Poseidon not so strong, though, is his early game abuse. He does have access to Ares, but I honestly, I haven't seen a lot of people have success with Ares on a consistent basis at all. It's even if your opponent's got an exposed gold mine, things can go wrong for you, even with Pestilence and the Cyclops. It's just not that good. However, he does have access to Hippolyta and Theseus early, which can be very, very strong in the early game, though a lot of gods have an answer to that, so it doesn't really get there for me. I'm going to give Poseidon a B for his early game abuse. But that doesn't matter because his timing attacks are very, very strong. He's got an A tier timing attack. He's got the Earthquake. The problem with it is it just comes in a little bit late. Unlike Ra, Set, Fuji. Unlike these gods, the Mythic Age for Poseidon is just a little bit slow. Still very, very good, though, if you can pull it off. You've also got the Chimera to back it up in order to pick off all those villages and make life really good for yourself. 2 town center play for Poseidon is an S tier, and this is tied into a similar reason why Noir is in the S tier for the 2 town center game. It's not like it comes out crazy fast. You're looking at like a 4:30 second town center starting time. But because his late game is so strong, Poseidon has got an S tier late game, and we can talk about that a lot. That's why the S tier is there for the 2 town center game. So late game Poseidon, he's Greek. He's got the Heliopolis, super strong late game thing. He's got Towers, Walls, Petropolis, Toxotes, super strong, very hard to break that. And most importantly, he's got those militia, which are essentially super cheap mercenary, which your opponent has to bring into the game by killing your fortresses and everything else. Poseidon late game, super strong. You'll see Matrius being able to compete with like the super late game powerhouses like Ra a lot of the time. So Poseidon, you gotta give credit where credit's due. Moving on to the next god, we've got Oranos up here. Oranos, super, super strong god here. He's got an S tier consistency as well. He's good on every single map, and I don't actually think he's got a bad map, but there are some maps where it's like, oh, I kind of wish I wasn't playing against this god on this map. Not because I'm bad on this map, just because the other god's really good on this map. So he's still got an S tier consistency though. His early game abuse is S tier as well. He's got the early cheap oracles. Never ever use Valor on this. Just convert them. Just convert them manually. It's completely fine. You just skip. If you feel like you're going to go for an early game play with your oracles, you just skip hand axe, pickaxe, convert those oracles in, and then you make your Valor onto a hero citizen plus 3 Murmillo. Live the dream. Get that pressure in there. Early game abuse, super, super strong. He's got the flood. It's super good. Oranos' timing attacks are S tier because he gets the Tartarian Gate down. He hits someone and it hits a different place. So Tartarian Gate attacks somewhere else. Super hard to stop. His economy is huge at that point in the game. Super hard to stop. And he's also got Chaos. And Chaos is pretty good as well. It's going to be able to kill off, turn an enemy unit to attack, myth unit to attack the army. Can combine those things as well, getting super strong Satyr as well, which are really hard to deal with in those timing attacks. So definitely S tier timing attack. His 2 town center game is basically non-existent. I give it a B simply because if your opponent goes 2 town centers, you do have an answer for it in 3 town centers. It's very, very strong if you can get those up. But 2 town center game, you're never going to be able to really you don't want to play a 2 town center game with Oranos generally. So I put B in there. So deal with it, I guess, Oranos lovers. And his late game is a C tier. His late game is very, very bad. But he's going to be beating most of the gods before then anyways. And essentially Oranos loses if his opponent gets to the late game. So he's got a C there for that one. Hades is on our list next. Hades is up here. Super high up on this list. Super strong god. The only problem with Hades, essentially, is that his consistency is a B tier. It's not even an A tier at this point. Consistency is a B tier. If he gets a bad map, he's in for a world of pain. He's in for a world of pain because he's all about defending. And you have to get certain things up in order to defend. So his consistency is pretty lackluster. He's in a very similar position to Poseidon in terms of his early game abuse. So we're going to put him exactly the same as Poseidon with a B tier early game abuse. He does have Ares. He does have Athena. But these things, he's not going to be able to punish you for having an exposed gold mine most of the time. Just not strong enough in that regard. His timing attacks, very similar to Poseidon as well. He gets Earthquake. He can hit that timing pretty much exactly with the same problem with him. He doesn't have that lure in order to give himself safe food, but it's most of the time you're going to be fine. And it's not going to matter if you got a decent enough map to do that. If you don't have a decent map to do that, you're probably going to be going in with your 2-town center game, which is an absolute S tier. This god, very similar to Ra, very similar to Poseidon as well in this. He's got 2 town centers. Fantastic. He's got an amazing late game because of the powerful buildings. Gastrophety come into the game some of the time, but super archers and super strong buildings. It's going to be tough to take Hades out in the late game. And we'll move on to the next god. We have Shennong. Shennong here, the Chinese gods are sitting up high on this list. We don't see a lot from Shennong. So this one here I might be wrong about. But I feel like if people gave Shennong more of a go and they actually understood what Shennong's win conditions were, and you're going to understand that from this, then you would probably appreciate why Shennong's up here. Now, Shennong's got a similar consistency to Hades. He doesn't have any super helpful god powers to make those bad maps work. He's not the best on water, but it's not the end of the world. He actually does have he's probably a little bit better on water than Noir because of his god power as well. So maybe a little bit better in terms of consistency here. But I'm putting a B tier simply because what makes him strong, we'll get to, but he's not able to get that point a lot of the time. So his early game abuse is non-existent. He has a C tier early game abuse because he has no call to arms. Volley's not going to help out at all. Great Journey is not going to help out at all. And he's just slow like Noir as well. So he's got a C early game abuse. His timing attacks, however, are S tier. He's got Great Flood, and having Great Flood means you have 3. I didn't really talk about this with Fuji, but Great Flood has got 3 properties. 1 is villager kills, 2 is army kills, and 3 are building destruction. Those are 3 things. Most god powers do 1. This does 3. So if you get good value from 2 of these, then you've got a very, very strong timing attack to do with, to abuse. And that's where we come in with Shennong. That's why his timing attack is S. He's also got an A tier town center game, 2-town center game. And the problem with his 2-town center game is simply just if he doesn't have a really good map, he's going to be struggling. He's going to have to utilize his god power to start farming. And that basically, that's just going to like really slow you down and make it tough on your opponent. He's probably going to be able to timing attack you out of the game most of the time. However, if he does get to the late game, he is the best late game god in the game. Shennong is the best late game god in the game. He essentially has super cheap Ballista in the Fire Lancers, but they're better than Ballista because they deal splash damage. That's insane. So if Shennong can set up towers and have Fire Lancers built, there is no unit combination in the game which can defeat this. No unit combination can defeat the Fire Lancer tower shenanigans. So if Shennong can get there, he's in a fantastic position. He's also got access to the White Tiger as well. So he's got a similar position to Noir in that regard. Anyways, so he's sitting here in the B tier. We've got one more god for the B tier. It is indeed Odin. Odin's sitting here in the B tier. Contemplated putting him a little bit higher, but when I saw what I ranked him, I thought, oh, maybe not. But he does have the S tier consistency. And that's why I would maybe want to put him a bit higher. He's got great hunt, so every single map is going to be a fantastic time for him, is essentially where that's coming from. Good on Midgard. He's pretty good on Anatolia. Mediterranean, people are working out how to solve that one for him, or have worked out how to solve that one, so it's no longer like a shoot me in the foot kind of map. All of the land maps which have half decent hunt, he's really good on. It's just a couple of maps like Alfheim. Maybe even Oasis isn't a bad map for Odin either, because you can great hunt your herdables and have a fantastic time eating those. He's got an A tier early game abuse. This might come as a shock to a lot of you, but he's got Lone Wanderer Ulsarks. They're really good early game, and he can punish you. If you're playing Oranos and you got an exposed gold mine, he can punish you. So he's not a bad early game god at all, especially because of how consistent he is. And we also see players like Soup going for like Heimdall shenanigans, forward temples, Rappel doing similar stuff as well. You can go for the pure gatherer opener and get like a super early classical age. And you can do a lot of really, really strong things in the early game with Odin. His timing attacks are an A tier, and I say this, why he's not an S tier in the timing attacks is simply because he doesn't have a destructive god power. If he had, like, for example, if Fimbul Winter would guarantee kill a town center, this god would have an S tier timing attack for sure, because he gets to the mythic age so quickly because of the hunt bonus he gets. But because he doesn't, he does have Frost. Now, Frost is essentially Lightning Storm, so he can kill off an entire army with that. So he does have a very strong timing attack game if you want to cast Frost, Fimbul Winter, attack. It's pretty brutal. You can kill a lot of units off and feel like you're in a really good position in the game. Odin doesn't have a good town center game, 2 town center game at all. It's kind of a B tier, though there is some argument that if you can go 2 town center, fast heroic into Huskar Bogsviger, you will be in a fantastic position because that unit composition is super strong for that period of the game. So he's got this weird position where he gets this super strong army composition, but his late game isn't quite good enough to carry it through. It's kind of, he's only got an A tier late game. So his 2 town center game is slow. Is one of the slowest 2 town centers builders in the game. The Norse are. He's got kind of an okay late game because of side builds and Bogsviger, but he just, and Ballister as well, obviously, but it's not enough to pull him up there. And that's why he's sitting down here. Now, if you think that Odin's got a stronger 2 town center game than I do, then maybe he's sitting up higher. Maybe he's doing fine. But I just don't see it there. And he's sitting down here feeling sad for himself at the end of the B tier list. But still super strong god. Don't get me wrong, this god can definitely take games off a lot of these gods as well on a lot of the maps. All right, so now we're moving into the C tier. There's some gods down here that you would not be expecting to see here, but I'll explain. We've got Isis sitting here in the C tier. This god, the real reason why this god is in the C tier is because her consistency is god awful. Her consistency is complete rubbish. We have a C tier consistency here, and because consistency is so important to me, that's why she's down here. If she struggles to find food in order to get her heroic age timing out, she's going to struggle. She's not good on Mediterranean. She's not good on Midgard, in my opinion. I think that's quite clear. She's really good on Anatolia, probably the best god on Anatolia, but that's about it. And because she's got such a rubbish early game, rubbish consistency, she's in a lot of pain. And then we got the early game abuse. She gets abuse in the early game. If she doesn't have safe second hunt, life's tough for her. She's going to have to move back into her home base. Hope she found enough herdables with her priest and obelisk scouting. Scouting is really slow because of the priest. You kind of have to scout priest and pharaoh in order to make sure you find the food you need. So super, super sad god here. But when things go her way, she's got an S tier timing attack. We've seen it. 1 town center. Priest Siege is good. 1 town center. Carried Archer Siege. Scorpion Man's really, really good as well. She doesn't really have like a mythic age timing she can go for, though Thoth, it kind of works some of the time if you get a good meteor. But super strong there. Her 2 town center game is S tier as well if she gets the right map for it. She can go for those, like for example, similar to how Ra can do a rainless 8-minute heroic age. Isis can do exactly the same, but you just need to have a good map for it. And also she's got a pretty good late game. It's A tier in the late game. The reason why is normally you're not going Hathor. If you are playing for the late game, you should definitely go Hathor with this god Isis, and then you can possibly be similar to Ra strength, especially if you go like Hathor, Thoth, getting yourself all of the technologies that come with those. So Book of Thoth, Mudbrick, and Magi. You can kind of compete with Ra in the late game. Funnily enough, even though you're probably not going to be making elephants because your opponent's probably going to be making mummies to deal with that. So feels bad, but it is the way it is. So that's where that is. And we have Kronos coming in here in the next slot. Kronos has got A tier consistency because of this, like basically similar reason to Oranos. Kronos, he can function well on every single map. It's just that some maps it's like if it's a defensive map, it kind of sucks. So he's got an S, maybe even S plus tier early game abuse, and he's going to be able to scout out if he can go for that or not. 6 Oracle early game, 4 minute 30 advanced times 6 Oracles with focus. It's very, very tough to defend that kind of a early game attack with any civilization. And if your opponent's not prepared or has a bad map, Kronos is going to get his wins that way. But the problem really is that he's never going to. It's kind of a fool's errand. It doesn't happen all the time. And if you're going to go with Kronos, you're probably going to, and you're going to go for these strategies, your win rate's going to suffer. And his timing attacks are pretty similar to Oranos, but he doesn't have access to Tartarian gates, so he has to go in with the implode, which is still pretty good. It's a bit sad. We got him at A tier because of no Tartarian gate. He can't destructive god power somewhere, attack somewhere else. He has to destructive god power in that one location and then push in afterwards. Can work, does kill off a lot of units. Not as good as Tartarian gate in my opinion. That's why it's A tier. His 2 town center game is kind of non-existent. It's kind of a C tier 2 town center game. If you're going for, he does have the similar response to a 2 town center that Oranos does in grabbing 3 town centers straight away. But it's just, he can't play defensive. You can't play defensive. His late game is a bit stronger than Oranos. He's a B tier late game because of time shift. He can time shift palaces into funky positions. And he's got Vortex as well with Hecagigantes if he wants to go there with the super strong siege in the late game. Obviously, Oranos still has that as well for himself. But for the most part here, he's just because of the time shift, he's a touch better than Oranos. Next god on the list, we have Zeus. Oh, why is Zeus so far down on this tier list? Everyone, he's such an oppressive god. We're talking about Zeus at the top level here, ladies and gentlemen. Zeus is in a struggle town. If you listen to Mister, if you listen to any of the really, really strong Zeus players, he's been neutered a little bit too much, and a lot of players can deal with, if they're on a similar level, can deal with this early game aggression. He's got B tier consistency. He doesn't have the help of, well, it's basically the same as Hades, right? He doesn't have the help of that lure to help him through. If he's got a bad map, he's got a bad map, and he's going to have to be sad for the entire game. He's really good on Mediterranean, though, still, because of Bolt on a ship plus Restoration. So he does have some really good maps, but Zeus is feeling sad a lot of the time. His early game abuse is really good. It's an A tier early game abuse god. I would put it S tier, but I feel like a lot of people can deal with the Athena Rush. I feel like a lot of gods can deal with the Athena Rush nowadays. It's not as good as it used to be, especially after Restoration nerfs and how people have learned how to defend with wall chips and all the other kind of abusive things that you can use to defend. There is the fact that if your opponent's tower is on top of the gold mine, that is a go-go sign for a Zeus player. I say go-go sign because you can't wall chip that tower. So if you basically all you can do is put houses around it, you can just rush in with Restoration, kill that tower, and then be on the gold mine and gold starve. Yeah. This is extended edition after all. We do have a B tier for the timing attacks. He gets Hera, gets Lightning Storm, but doesn't really have a destructive building god power. So he can get 2 of the 3 close to. He needs to get super value out of Lightning Storm if he's going for a timing attack. And a lot of the times it doesn't happen. I see a lot of times Hera is the god of choice for Zeus players trying to finish off a game, but a lot of the time it's just not working. So he's only got a B tier timing attack here. He does have an A tier 2 town center game and an A tier late game, but because of how the consistency issues that he's going to suffer from, 2 town center game is not the best. Because if you have a bad map, getting a 430 with both the heroes out, bit sad. And his late game is an A tier. It's not quite on the level of Poseidon, who's got the militia. It's not quite on the level of Hades, who's got the stronger buildings. But he is still good. It's still good. Still A tier. He can still kind of compete with the late game with a lot of gods. So I wouldn't be so sad about that one there. All right, now we're going for the final one. There's an argument that this god here should be in the D tier, but we're going to put him in the C tier just to make things a little bit more interesting. We've got Thor here. He is B tier consistent. Now, the problem with Thor is that if you don't get herdables, you're sad. You're just sad. So you have to go double Ulfsark in a lot of matchups, which is going to slow you down. in order to make sure you get hurtable so you don't just die. You do get the Dwarven Gold Mine, which is going to keep your consistency alive just a little bit longer, so you're not going to just lose on second gold mines most of the time. But because of no real assistance, his consistency is struggling at a B tier here. He does have the early game abuse. It's kind of non-existent. He doesn't have that lone wanderer shenanigans. He doesn't really have any options in the early game to punish opponents' bad maps. So he's at the B tier here. It's arguable that it would be a C tier, but I mean, you could probably make it work with like an armory Ulfsark strategy. So I'm gonna put a B tier here just to keep you on your toes. His timing attacks are very similar problem to Odin in that he doesn't really have them. He does have Frost. And he does have Fimbulwinter, so he does have that. It's slow, and because he's not consistent, because he doesn't always get the goats, he doesn't have great hunt for his goats, he can't really pull them off very well. So I'm going to put him a little bit lower than Odin as well, with a B tier on that as well. He's a very similar position to Odin as well in the 2 town center game, with a B tier for the 2 town centers, but he does have a decent late game because of the extra armory upgrades that he can get. Timing attacks, Bogs, Viger, Huskarl, etc., very good. So he's A tier there, but you can see he's just struggling, and that's why he's in the C tier. To get this god up to a stronger level, it's you just need to somehow figure out how to make him more consistent, and it's just not really possible with his kit, unfortunately. And now we've got in the D tier, we're going to chuck Loki in here. Loki sitting in the D tier isn't really because of anything other than consistency. And if this god was consistent, and this is why you see this in team games, if we were to do a team game tier list, Loki would be way up at the top. But because Loki is just not consistent at all, he is a C tier consistency god. That's why he's down here. And you can see it if you look at win rates with Loki. It's like some games he's just going to completely slap. He's just going to dominate. But overall, he's probably winning like 40% of the time. So it's why he's down here. It's this consistency fact. He's got early game abuse is totally there. He's got the Heimdall Rush. Hall of Thane's Herser can be enough to push in and punish some bad maps as well. So super good. Early game abuser. His timing attacks at S tier. He's got flaming weapons, Fimbulwinter combination, which with Herser spamming myth units, spawning myth units, I should say. So super good there. He does not have a 2 town center game to speak of, though there's some arguments that you can kind of play him like Odin with Thor and play for a late game, but his late game's not that great either. It's a B tier, though he does have access to Rampage, so he can get Fire Giant or Mountain Giant side builds going, but most of the time he's just going to lose those situations. So that's why he's sitting down here so low, so sad. But you do have to look at it and go, man, he's got early game abuse and timing attack, so he can get W's, he can win, but he's just a sad god. And we have Gaia sitting here, lucky last. Part of this is because her consistency is god awful. If she has a bad map, she loses, and she has nothing to really help her in that regard. She has some Gaia Forest trees, which can help defend a bad gold mine, but most of the time it's a bit sad. Where she does have early game abuse in the Gaia Forest trees, but if you're playing a tournament, that's going to get banned. So I'm going to kind of treat this as if it's a tournament, not if it's a ranked ladder. So Gaia does actually have a really strong early game abuse, but we're going to pretend like she doesn't because tournaments won't allow you. It's at C tier for that. Her timing attacks, they're actually not that bad. Her timing attacks are actually pretty good. She's kind of at an A tier for her timing attacks, which is almost wants me to make her go above Loki, but I'm just going to leave her at the end. She's got A tier timing attacks. Simply on the fact that she's got Tartarian Gate. She gets really big economic boost from the cheaper economic upgrade. So if you let her boom and hit you with a timing attack, like say with like heavy Contarius timing attacks can be really, really strong. Things like that. If you just let her do it, then you'll probably lose games against Gaia. So you have to be aware that that's possible. And then we've also got her 2 town center game is an A tier. Obviously, if you can get that second town center up, it's really, really good. Gaia, one of the only, like Oranos and Kronos can get the second town center up with the 2 town center archaic, but it doesn't really work because their late game is not that good. But Gaia's late game is actually pretty good. It's an A tier late game. And the more I talk about it, the more I kind of want to, I definitely want to put this Gaia above Loki. But yeah, so I'm going to pop her up here just because, maybe even above Thor, but I don't know. But she definitely does have an incredibly strong late game because of Gaia Lush. All you have to do is side build, attack a town center, chuck down some military buildings on the town center, and you get wins. You get wins with Gaia because of Gaia Lush. Super strong mechanic. And that's why her late game is really good. And also it slows them down, pushing you as well. So those are the reasons. That's my tier list. We've got Fuji, Set in the S tier. We've got Ra, Nuwa in the A tier. We've got Poseidon, Oranos, Hades, Shennong, Odin in the B tier. We got Isis, Kronos, Zeus, Thor in the C tier. We got Gaia and Loki in the D tier. I look forward to hearing you guys say you are crazy, Boit, in the comment section below, and telling me how bad I am at the game and how wrong I am with my tier list. This is the extended edition tier list 2021. If you guys enjoyed this video, please definitely leave a comment, leave a like, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next game.